This week we're switching things up, and I'm not talking about my lack of sunglasses. We're giving you no less ammo for your activism, though. So first up, let's talk Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Isn't it about time we tell big banks to go fuck themselves and take money into our own hands? Next up, Kevin Zeese has been on the front lines of marijuana politics for over 30 years. What's changed? Where are we at now? And what can we do? But first, I repeat, fools on repeat. Fools on repeat, I repeat, fools on repeat. From Britain to Iraq, stack 'em up, fools on repeat, I repeat. Cocky, the flock heeds your orders, need order and chaos. You reign just the same. On repeat, just the scenery's changed. From jungles to deserts, highlands to lowlands, the low road is paved with our shame. A plaque, we're so arrogant that we're proud of the blood on our hands. Yeah, people know us by name, and Machiavelli said it's better to be feared than loved. Well, look at the prince holding court. In a high-rise, rolling dice, trading lives. Pick a crime, we've done it, we've dealt it. Repeat, I repeat, fools on repeat, on repeat. Fools build schools just to bomb them, hospitals too, cause malice needs target practice, and slaughter needs fodder. You'll do. Arab features, wicked creature, 19 the death toll, enemies made by looks and your age. This ain't rage, this is cold, calculated murder. Murder for profit, and we the people bought it. How many leaks will it take till we realize we're drowning? How many whistleblowers caged? How many humans and futures to maim? Is there a goal? A point system so we know how much longer the slaughter will take? Or is it freeform and freefall? These guys, then you all. Clutch your guns, that's really too cute. Go ahead, point and shoot. The tanks that you paid for with hard work are now for you. Think I'm crazy? If you're black or you're brown, you've seen this go down. If you fight for justice, you've seen that hard line between the them and the just us. Drawn by the kings and their pawns, ironically next on the list. This empire survives on blood and your fears. These talking heads feed the 1% seeds of tyranny. Like shit in a garden, these lies sprinkled on your mind and grow. But gardens need tending to, even the weeds and the wicked ones. So, did you notice you don't fear the things that are really a threat? Oil spills, fracking drills, spying eyes that hacked your files and now know you watch this show. Oh, and the slave wages, debt cages, schools that won't teach you, hospitals can't or won't treat you. Guns cocked and loaded, a cock with a gun and he's loaded. Fire at will. Roll your eyes, but still, that's happened many more times than one or two Arab guys have threatened your life. Yes, many, many, many ills that threaten your life are not on a most wanted list or the news on at 5. They're covered in covert, classified, not for your eyes or your mind. Here, take this pill. We're peddling poison because we're corporate shills. Hands over hearts, I solemnly swear on this Capitol Hill that it's bullshit. The rich rob from the poor, then the poor turn to poorer and blame them for this. It's just sick. This chain of command that leaves freedom banned and you with nothing but fear in your hands. It's slick and it's smart, propaganda and art. But start to see what's behind these mirrors and smoke screens. Fools on repeat, I repeat, fools. Fools on repeat, I repeat, fools on repeat. We've been fooled. Once, twice, 3 times repeat. How many times do you need? From tweets to marching in the streets, this is Act Out. Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. There's been a lot of mostly me lately, so I figure it's about time to mix it up a bit and give you 2 awesome interviews, seemingly from 2 totally different issues, but really, it's all couched under the same umbrella of standing up to the corporatocracy and outfitting yourself with both knowledge and inspiration to start and to keep fighting. So, with that in mind, let's start off with Bitcoin, cryptocurrency. And it's taken me a long time to even know what these 2 words mean, but luckily I'm not going to be the one explaining what they mean to you. I will, however, give a quick and easy how-to on getting started with Bitcoin because it really is a lot easier than you may think. So, without further ado, let's get at the scoop on the future of money from cryptocurrency expert, tech entrepreneur, author, and frequent host of the Let's Talk Bitcoin podcast, Andreas Antonopoulos.
Essentially, it's internet money. It's money without banks, without governments, network-centric, based on the internet, just like email is communication without the post office, and the web is publication without news companies. Um, Bitcoin is money without banks and governments, money of the people for the people on the network.
I like that. So basically, why? I guess in the digital age, it's pretty obvious why you'd ask if you'd ask somebody, why do you use email as opposed to write letters? But why would you specifically use Bitcoin as opposed to trying to work within the confines of the system of money that we have currently?
Because the confines of the system of money that we have currently leaves about 4 billion people unbanked or underbanked and outside of the world economic system. It disenfranchises and disadvantages billions of people around the world. It doesn't scale. It doesn't offer solutions. It's hopelessly corrupt. It's unreformable. And it works as a nexus of large corporations and large governments covering each other's backs.
One of the main issues with the current money system is that it's not based on anything. It's just based on faith that it's going to work out okay. Which, of course, if that faith crumbles, then our entire economic power collapses. So, what is Bitcoin based on?
Well, it's also based on faith. It's based on faith in different things. It's based on faith in the economic activity of the internet. It's based on faith on the productive potential of billions of people who have been disconnected from world economic affairs due to geopolitics. Increasingly, there are no systems of money that are not based on faith. Money is a means of communication. It's how we communicate value to each other. Bitcoin is just the latest iteration. The difference is that it is entirely electronic and decentralized, which means that no one has direct control over it. It's uncensorable and it's internet-based. But it derives its value from the same proposition that all money derives its value, which is if a lot of people use it, and if I can expect that tomorrow I can use Bitcoin to buy products and services, then it has value to me.
Yeah, so basically it's just about shifting the paradigm from thinking about this as this abstract cryptocurrency is just thinking about it as money, essentially.
Yes, and more than money, it's a system of ownership. You can do some pretty exciting things with Bitcoin. You can, for example, register and transmit ownership of physical things, like you could record ownership of a bike or a house or a car and transmit that. You can do all kinds of things with complex contracts and the assignment of ownership. But at its basic level, the first app on the Bitcoin network is a basic currency app and a payment system, just like a credit card system. The difference is that I can send anywhere from $1 or 10 cents to $1 million from here to Kuala Lumpur in 5 seconds for a flat fee of about 2 cents, 2 US cents. And it doesn't matter how much money I'm sending, it costs about 2 cents. When the network is not very overused, you can even send free transactions without paying any fee whatsoever. If you compare that to what most people, like for example, immigrants pay in order to send money home through Western Union, on average 9%, that's a huge difference.
And so, I mean, just this idea that it's decentralized and it takes the governments and the banks and the corruption out of it, it seems like the obvious choice for the progression of activism and the progression of this sort of populist movement. Is there a chance, because this is always the question with activist movements, whether it be environment, Black Lives Matter, women's rights, can this be corrupted by the very banks and governments that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency are trying to avoid?
Potentially, although if they manage to corrupt one implementation of this, they can't corrupt the underlying technological idea. There's over 1,000 currencies with different permutations of this idea. Bitcoin has certain characteristics. There's other currencies that have different characteristics based on the same decentralized system. But the power of decentralization is that it resists corruption, because there is no single point of failure or center of power where you can apply pressure. You can't seize a server or lean on a company or monitor a specific server to see everything. So, that makes it much more resilient, just like things like BitTorrent and Tor on the web and things like that are decentralized and network centric. Corruption is a lot harder with systems like that.
And finally, I'm just curious because there are a lot of people that don't have internet access. So how do you see cryptocurrency as handling the issue that even a lot of Americans, particularly lower income, kids in schools that don't have access to the cryptocurrency and then therefore maintain their space inside this corrupt system? How do you see cryptocurrency trying to evolve within those confines of limited internet access?
Well, I think of it as really a gap between the technology and the infrastructure, and that gap is shrinking dramatically in two directions. First of all, Bitcoin is getting easier to use on simpler and simpler platforms. You can use Bitcoin over SMS on Nokia 1000 simple feature text messaging phone. There are almost 4 billion of those phones distributed throughout the developing world in places where people don't have clean water, don't have electricity other than a single solar panel to charge the single Nokia cell phone, but they have cell phones and they have text messaging. So data plans are not required. You can do it on much less infrastructure than that. There's a lot of interesting implications there. One of them is that, and this blows a lot of people's mind, is that you can take your entire Bitcoin wallet and you can translate it into 12 English words, memorize those, and then your money is essentially in your head. You can go anywhere in the world, cross borders, survive as a refugee on a boat, arrive in another country, take those 12 words and restore all of your wealth. No border person can seize it. No one can steal it from you. And no one knows that you have that money on you. And so you can imagine for empowering, for example, women in countries where ownership of money is illegal. There's a program where they're teaching Afghani girls how to code and get paid in Bitcoin, and they're not allowed to have a bank account, but they can own Bitcoin and essentially keep that hidden from men in their family who would otherwise basically beat the money out of them. Another way to think about this, which is, I think, really important, is that our future is going to be one of digital money. And so really we have two choices. One form of digital money is completely controlled end to end by banking organizations that feed all of the data to government in a cozy relationship that protects them from competition and gives totalitarian surveillance to government. That's a dystopia. That's a very dangerous future that's toxic to democracy. And the alternative is digital money, but controlled by the people, not subject to censorship or surveillance. And I think that's really why a lot of people in even developing world and the developed world are also interested in Bitcoin. It offers an alternative to a future that we're marching to, headlong, and which may be very dangerous to the basic institutions of freedom.
Interesting. So, last question. What you just said sort of sparked this last question. How do you see this playing out? If you had some sort of concept of what the future might look like, and of course, the banks and governments will try to respond in the ways that they know how, which is by force. How do you see cryptocurrency and Bitcoin going beyond that and going through that and possibly living through a revolution, hopefully not a bloody one? How do you see it coming out on the other side once the governments and the banks do try to clamp down on this?
I think it's inevitable that we are going to see a backlash, and really, some governments are going to strongly object to the idea that their citizens should control their own money. And at that point, you should ask, why are those governments objecting, and what's wrong with that form of government rather than what's wrong with Bitcoin? The corruption, the centralization, the fragility of the system inherent in all of the problems we see are leading to crises that are getting bigger and bigger over time. And there are plenty of countries where money goes into a hyperinflation spiral. And until now, governments had the ability to take an entire population hostage when that happened, but not anymore. Now, people can essentially opt out of the economic system of their government and opt into the economic system of the internet using cryptocurrencies. And that's going to change geopolitics dramatically, just as the freedom to publish and speak on the internet, and the freedom to communicate and connect across borders on the internet has massively affected geopolitics. And now we're doing that with money. And it's going to have a ripple effect throughout history, regardless of whether Bitcoin itself, as the first attempt to make this happen, succeeds or not.
Thank you so much for all of this information. It's intense and inspiring to hear about it because I did not have a very firm handle, but you did a great job of explaining it. Um, is there anything else that, like any last tidbits that you want to put out there?
One little anecdote. Back in 2010, WikiLeaks, an organization that I'm sure you're well familiar with, was subject to an extrajudicial embargo, whereby the US government and other governments bullied Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, American Express, and other companies to cut off their funding. And WikiLeaks found itself without any funding, even though they had broken the law and had been charged of no crime and could defend themselves against no crime because all of this was done without the judicial system. That shows the dangers of centralized control over money. In the end, WikiLeaks became one of the rallying calls in the early days of Bitcoin, and they started using Bitcoin to raise funds. Today, the vast majority of funds that WikiLeaks raises are directly in Bitcoin, and through Bitcoin, they've been able to break this embargo. And we're going to see this happening again and again and again.
For more on Andreas and his work, which focuses heavily on using technology to promote free speech, open and transparent networks, open governments, social justice, human rights, and citizen empowerment, follow him on Twitter at the handle below. And before we wrap up this Bitcoin segment, let me show you how to start spending and accepting Bitcoin in a matter of clicks and swipes. So, according to Andreas, one of the better Bitcoin wallets for iPhone is called Bread Wallet. For Android, he recommends Mycelium or Airbits. So, download the wallet app from your app store or whatever Android users have, and once you have it, you'll want to set up an account. And here's the best part. Remember when Andreas mentioned that you can essentially memorize 12 words? 12 words and your entire bank account will be saved wherever you go. Yeah, that's right here. The app will ask you to make a note of your phrase, and don't try to pull a screenshot because it doesn't like that. And it will immediately tell you not to try that shit again. So, in the interest of privacy and security, don't try that shit. At this point, you'll feel a bit like James Bond and will immediately find a paper and pen to write down your phrase, memorize it, and then swallow the paper, or just hide it somewhere. The app will also ask you for a PIN, which acts as a safety mechanism when you decide to send money or check your account balance. The app will then generate a QR code, aka those squares containing what looks like over-pixelated sticks that you use to get into concerts and movies, onto planes, etc. It will also generate a number. These are your Bitcoin wallet identifiers. A person with Bitcoin can scan the QR code to send you money. That's mine, by the way, so if you've been itching to donate to the cause, have at it. You just scan the QR code or input the number and send them money. And before the transactions are sent, or before you can take a look at your transaction history and account details, you have to type in that PIN again. And furthermore, you don't have to worry about figuring out the conversion from dollars or euros or yen or whatever to Bitcoin. You can input your own currency and it will automatically convert to Bitcoin, showing you both in any transaction. From here, go crazy. Add a Bitcoin option to your online store. Find businesses in your area that accept Bitcoin. Transfer some money from the old guard to the new guard. Just don't forget those 12 words and that 4-digit PIN. And again, for more information on the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency movement, follow Andreas and check out the Let's Talk Bitcoin website at letstalkbitcoin.com. Now, moving on, let's shift gears to the front lines of the legalized marijuana movement. Kevin Zeese, whose name might sound familiar from, well, pick an issue. Indeed, a bit like the TPP. One of his main issues at the moment, Kevin doesn't just deal with one single issue. He specializes in fighting the corporatocracy on many fronts, whether that be the TPP, single-payer healthcare, military-industrial complex, prison-industrial complex, surveillance, open internet, for which he and Margaret Flowers camped outside the FCC, Black Lives Matter, fracking, drilling, spilling, and all the others that I do not have time to mention. On top of this, Kevin has been working on marijuana politics for the past 36 years. Yeah, that's a picture of him back in the late 80s at a hearing before DEA Judge Frances Young. Marijuana activist May Nutt is testifying regarding losing her son to cancer. Needless to say, this incredibly powerful testimony is not only responsible for bringing a tear to Kevin's eye, but also for pushing the judge to rule in favor of removing marijuana from a Schedule I categorization, being the most dangerous and deadly categorization given by the DEA. Unfortunately, you may have noticed, the judge's ruling was overturned, and 25 plus years later, we still can't seem to figure out the difference between heroin and weed. I'll give you a hint, though. Overdoses. And that's just one. So the fight wages on, and Kevin, as usual, is on the front lines. Late last week, we sat down to talk to him about this ongoing fight. Take a look.
I got into it because I was in law school and I was planning on being a criminal defense lawyer, and I went to the person in charge of internships, and he put me at NORML, the National Organization for Reform Marijuana Laws, back in 1979. I was at George Washington University. My job initially was to track state legislation to see what legislatures were doing and to respond to prisoner mail and prisoner family mail. So I got to see pretty much directly the impact of the injustice of marijuana prohibition on people's lives. And you saw the racism, you saw the undercover police abuse, you saw the prosecutorial abuse, all these kinds of issues that we are now realizing on a more wide level today, thanks to Black Lives Matter and other efforts, were existing then too. And I saw all that. There were hundreds of thousands of people being arrested in those days, 350 to 450,000 a year. Now we're at about 700,000 a year, so it still continues to be a big problem. But a lot has changed. The biggest thing that's changed has been public opinion. Now we have over 70% support, even in southern states, conservative states. You have widespread support of medical marijuana. You have almost 24 states now who legalize medical marijuana. We're moving forward on regulation and taxation of marijuana. We'll see a bunch of states next election year doing that. We've already have 4 states legalizing. And so we're making progress on all fronts. So it's great to see an issue move. The reality is social justice takes time. It takes a lot of time for people to get over, especially something like marijuana, which has so much propaganda wrapped up in it, so much racism wrapped up in it. It takes time for people to, be able to make change.
And what has been the main hurdle for that? You talked about, prisons and also, of course, Big Pharma has stood in the way of that. What are the main hurdles, especially since, as you said, popular opinion is at 70% for legalizing marijuana?
Well, it's at that's for medical marijuana, and it's at that stage now, and it's new, and so I think you're starting to see change. But what really held it back, I think, was there's a lot of fear and prejudice, a lot of misinformation, a lot of propaganda in the public level, in the level of people profiting from the marijuana war and the drug war. You could look at every agency of federal government and see them profiting. Even the Forest Service.
And I mean, we've seen in Colorado that Colorado has made over $40 million in taxing their marijuana. So I mean, you're talking about like a huge hurdle being the fact that even the Forest Service was getting money from the drug war. Is this going to help that shift, seeing how there's still money to be made? So even far-right conservatives will see that they can still make money off of marijuana?
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of other things that have changed too. I don't think we would win just by money, but I think money certainly helps. I think we win because people know the drug war is not working. If you're really afraid of marijuana, if you think it's a really dangerous drug, why would you want it to be unregulated? Why do you want to be uncontrolled? And if you are recognizing the reality of marijuana, which is probably one of the safest of the various drugs to choose from, including drugs like tobacco and alcohol, or many prescription drugs, if you see that, then that makes no sense either. So what does the drug laws actually help? Does it help the person who is an occasional user and does not have a problem with it? Doesn't help them, makes their life a mess. It costs the government, costs the taxpayer lots of money. Does it help the person who's an addict? No, they don't need to be in prison. They need health care. They need health services. And so I think once you start to really get away from the emotion and you see how the policy just doesn't make sense no matter what perspective you look at it, the change is going to come. And then having the ability to raise lots of tax dollars for much needed services, that certainly adds to it.
And you also sent me some information just yesterday that spoke to and I think you just mentioned it as well, that there's been an increase in marijuana-related arrests. Is this sort of like a last-ditch effort from the war on drugs to try and overtake the advocacy for legalizing marijuana? And how does this fit into the paradigm of 70% being for medical marijuana? And
when you have 700,000 people arrested and look at the statistics, you see that almost 90% of those are just possession arrests. So that makes it even worse. I think what you're seeing is a policy in transition where you have lots of states where marijuana still remains illegal, and you have big police forces that are still focused on that as an easy, it's almost like shooting fish in a barrel, an easy arrest to make. And it does have a play into the racial injustice system because more police are focused in communities of color. And that results in more arrests in those communities, and that means a record for people. That means harder to get a job. That means when you get arrested again for something, the more likely to go to jail. So it's just a kind of a bad cycle. And there's this whole kind of mentality that we have to overcome, that we think that just by making something illegal, we can stop it. It's not how it works. You and I, for example, could be sitting here drunk, out of our minds. It's legal. We're not. Why not? Because the culture has taught us that that's not the appropriate thing to do when you're being interviewed or interviewing somebody. And so it's not the law that changed our behavior, it was the culture. And in fact, when you have something prohibited, it prevents that culture from developing.
So in your fight with in marijuana politics, how does that tie into all of you mentioned the prison industrial complex, but how do all of the issues that you work on tie together?
Well, they're all rooted in correcting injustice. And that's the first thing that connects them. I mean, we're talking about environmental justice, climate justice. We're talking about housing justice. We're talking about labor justice. We're talking about, on issue after issue, it's about creating justice. And that's one way they're all connected. And the second way, another way they're connected is that the same roadblocks stand between us and justice. And those roadblocks are an oligarch government that resembles a democracy but isn't really one. It's kind of a mirage democracy. But I think so we see the same roadblocks of money and power, protecting their status quo interests versus correcting an injustice. And that's the thing. When I worked on drug policy, it started out as marijuana, but it became connected to so many issues. It became connected to employment rights with drug testing. It became connected to militarism with the war on drugs in Colombia and other countries, in Bolivia and other countries. It became racism because of the disproportionate use of police and prisons and at every step of the criminal justice process seeing racially disproportionate effects. So it became healthcare when you saw HIV being spread by needles and a lack of access to healthcare. It became healthcare on lack of access to treatment. You basically were required to be sent by a court and your insurance didn't often cover treatment. And so you had these health injustices. And so it was so interesting when, even though it was a single issue I worked on for 35 years now, even at that stage, you saw it connecting directly. And indirectly, it was all rooted in injustice, and we have to correct those injustices. It's rooted really in bully behavior by the elites against people who have less power. And that's what really drives me in this, is I don't like bullies beating up on people in an unjust way.
Lots to dig in for those interested in this issue. For more on Kevin and his work, check out popularresistance.org and tune in to him and Margaret speaking truth to expose the forces of greed on Clearing the Fog Radio every Monday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. And you can also get one of these shirts and wear your activism literally on your sleeve at flushthetpp.org. And that, revolutionaries, does it for this week. Hope you enjoyed the little change-up. And as you sit there with a medicinal bowl and your new Bitcoin app, please spread and share this episode with all of your friends, foes, and people you don't know. Check out the last slide to see all the sites that I mentioned in the show. There will also be a link to help support Occupy.com and all the delicious dissent delivered daily thanks to donations like yours. It is a 501c3 nonprofit, so anything that you can contribute is tax-deductible and hugely appreciated. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. From the typically loud and sunny Devil's Den, good night and act out.